The film opens with a shot of a well-dressed lady, Allison, in downtown Seattle, sitting at a cafe table and gazing wistfully at photos inside a book she carries with her. It looks like they are photos from a long time ago, from when she was younger, with a figure who is perhaps her mother. As she closes the book with the photos inside, her friend approaches, putting her drink down in front of her, and asks how her interview at the mayor's office went. It turns out Allison is a journalist, but even though she just got a huge scoop from the mayor himself, she doesn't seem to be all that excited about it. She wants to cover stories that are more homely, more personal, rather than chasing big-time fame and politicians. Her friend can't believe that Allison enjoys such a plain drink, rather than the souped-up cream whip creation she's got. But Allison shrugs at her words and repeats her life mantra that the simple things can make one the happiest. It seems that despite being a city girl with a great job and fashionable dress sense, Allison only wants the simple things at heart. Her friend asks her if they can go and spend the rest of the afternoon together, but she declines because she wants to work on a pitch she's in the process of drafting. Upon her friend's insistence to elaborate, she mentions that the previous night was the anniversary of her mom's death, which explains why she was gazing so wistfully at the photos earlier on. The book she brought with her is from the old memory box she was looking through in a fit of nostalgia, and it's by one of her favorite authors from childhood, Annabel Harper. Apparently, all the novels Harper wrote were based in one place, Clybourne Ranch, which Allison has just found out is a real place. She's excited and inspired, because she's been looking for her muse, and she thinks that she just might have found it, if she could go to the ranch and visit. She is apprehensive, though, that her boss will not approve of the idea, hence her working so hard on the pitch. The next day, Allison is at work, practicing her speech and psyching herself up. Her friend, who also works there, shows her story on the mayor which broke the front pages and urges her to believe in herself. Motivated, Allison heads off to her boss Ivy's office. Ivy is a terrifying woman reminiscent of the classic Miranda Priestly, a powerful bully who controls her employees through fear, and Allison swallows nervously at the prospect of asking her for anything. However, before she can get away, she's noticed and Ivy calls her in. Miraculously, though, Ivy praises her article, claiming that she gave Allison the job right out of college because she realized even back then that she was a gifted journalist, and she should use this momentum to climb to the top. Allison, though, has exactly the opposite in mind, and nervously begins her pitch. It turns out Ivy has already heard of Annabel Harper and thinks her novels are trashy romance garbage that are far too far removed from real life. Ivy is immediately dismissive of Allison's proposal to do an expose on Harper and her story, because it's not in line with what the newspaper sells. However, Allison is persistent, claiming that she's spent 8 years working for Ivy, but she doesn't feel fulfilled there, and she truly believes that this might be what she's missing from her career. Still clearly unconvinced, Ivy lets her speak about Clybourne Ranch, and how she would be able to stay there and write an amazing piece about Harper's creative process. She eventually agrees on the basis that she doesn't want Allison to leave for another publication. She firmly states, though, that she expects Allison to return after the week's up and get back to writing proper, hard news. Allison is thrilled and heads off right away. Clybourne Ranch is nestled in a small town called Cedar Creek, with a beautiful rustic charm. The owner is an older lady, Stella, who is personal friends with Harper, and with whom Allison will be working closely during the writing of her expose. We see her now with her grandson Hank as he loads hay into a truck. She reminds him to drop off a fruit basket gift for her friend Susan, even though he tells her exasperatedly that if she keeps giving everything away, they'll have nothing left to sell. She isn't interested in making profits, though, only enough to get by and have some left over for friends and family. Hank rolls his eyes at his grandmother's generosity, clearly being more commercially minded, but does as he's asked nevertheless. Meanwhile, Allison is driving through the town in search of the ranch. She parks up in the town center, coincidentally right next to Hank's truck. He spots her leaving her vehicle as they both head into the same store. Allison has her eye on a beautiful orchid which she's intending to buy as a thank you gift for Hank's grandmother. But as she's about to pick it up, Hank also reaches for the same flower. He tries to insist on letting her have the orchid, as he's already mesmerized by her beauty, but she walks out, politely declining, because he was there first. As she returns to her car, however, she finds the orchid sitting on the bonnet, and is delighted to find a sweet note from Hank proclaiming that he couldn't be called a gentleman if he let a lady leave without flowers. She looks around, but sees no sign of the handsome stranger, so she takes the orchid and continues on her way to Clybourne. Stella is picking up the mail with a worried expression just as Allison rolls into the ranch. She introduces herself and hands over the flower, and Stella is touched by her thoughtful gesture. Allison explains that there was a guy involved, and Stella laughs that there always is. She takes her inside and leads her to the room that Harper would stay in when she wrote her novels. The old Remington typewriter is still at the desk, which faces out onto a beautiful rolling field surrounded by woodland. Allison is immediately amazed and inspired by the scenery, and Stella tells her that she's welcome to use the typewriter if she wants to. Allison can't believe her luck and can't wait to get started on her work, more than excited to be in the very place and using the very instrument that Harper used to write all her favorite books. She gazes reverently at the typewriter, fully aware of its value and history. Allison heads to the kitchen after freshening up and asks Stella if they could start with the interview. After all, she's the one who knew Annabelle Harper best. Stella admits that she was surprised by Allison's eagerness when she called, because she didn't know that her friend Annabelle's work was still remembered, let alone inspiring enough for a young journalist to come and do a piece about her. Allison simply claims it's long overdue, and begins the interview. They speak about Annabelle Harper and her life and upbringing. She never knew her father and never went to school or had a formal education. She taught herself to write and battled her way through a patriarchal world to find her place in it and earn her success. Allison is even more inspired after listening to the truth about Harper's life. Stella mentions that there's a foundation in town now, the Cookie Kids, for underprivileged children. But just as she's about to get into the details, loud shouts come from outside, and Hank bursts into the room, chasing a laughing young girl. She introduces herself as Marie. It turns out she's Susan's granddaughter, and she's a youth leader volunteer for the Cookie Kids. Stella asks if Hank's going to introduce himself, as he's still in shock that the beautiful Allison is the guest who will be staying with them, and he stutters over his words as he mentions that they already met earlier. Allison thanks him for the orchid, glad to have a chance to officially meet him. But thanks to Hank's awkwardness, there's a serious tension between the two which is obvious to everyone around them. Hank departs with Marie soon afterwards, and Stella apologizes for her grandson's behavior. Oblivious, Allison chalks it up to her being a journalist and making him nervous. Stella proposes a tour of the house, but stops when she realizes Allison is wearing stilettos which will not last 10 minutes on the ranch. She gives her a pair of Wellington boots and takes her out to the orchard where they discuss Annabelle's belief in the power of healing through nutrition. And Allison admits that she's got a small window garden because she wanted to see if it was true. Nearby, Hank is picking strawberries with Marie and tells her that the reason the ranch is so successful is because it's been in their family for generations, and they know how to take care of the land in the same way the land takes care of them. Stella brings Allison over, interrupting the conversation, and tells Marie it's time for the Cookie Kids meeting, leaving the rest of the tour to Hank. Left alone, Hank explains that the name came from Stella's cookies, which brings kids from all over town, and they trade her time doing small tasks in the fields in exchange for the cookies, a way of teaching them responsibility. She even lets them keep a significant portion of the profit from the fruit they pick. Allison is impressed by the foundation and wants to incorporate it into the article, excited at the prospect of shining a light on all Stella's hard work with the local kids. Hank, though, shuts down as soon as she takes out her phone to record him, and refuses to answer any more questions, brushing her off and leaving. It seems as though he has some issues with journalism. Allison watches him go, sadly wondering what she did wrong. Later, Allison has a video call with her friend, who's at the same cafe they were drinking at earlier. Her friend inquires as to the progress of her trip, and Allison excitedly imparts everything she's been up to, and vehemently denies the existence of any handsome cowboys. In fact, she says she's pretty sure that cowboys and journalists don't mix, thinking back to her interaction, or lack thereof, with Hank after she tried to ask him an interview question. As she finishes up the call, Stella enters the room with a cup of the sweet tea that Allison likes, and explains that she should enjoy it while watching the sunset. She leads Allison out to the terrace for the best view, but then has to go inside to tend to her cooking, leaving her to wander up to where Hank is sitting in a deck chair. He gets up to leave when she approaches, but she asks him to stay, and he eventually settles back down, albeit reluctantly. He's extremely cautious of her. They make light conversation, and Hank reveals that he used to reside in the city. His impression of her is clearly that of a gritty, hard-nosed journalist who's there to uncover their whole lives. So Allison tries to explain that that's not her goal. She only wants to shed light on the life of Annabelle Harper because she took so much personal inspiration from her books. Hank seems to soften a little at seeing Annabelle's passion for the place, but explains sadly that it's his job to protect Stella, and right now, it's a very bad time to have anything published about their family or their affairs. Allison is confused, because Stella told her it would be the perfect time, but Hank seems to disagree with her. It seems that something big is about to change in the lives of the Clybourne family, and she could very well have landed herself right in the middle of it. Hank asks her why she came to Clybourne specifically, and Allison tells him the truth, that it's because it's where Annabelle found her inspiration, and she wants to follow in her footsteps and reintroduce her work to the world with the same vision. Hank's skeptical, because he thinks journalists fabricate stories to lure in readers, but Allison's disappointed in his opinion and shrugs it off, because she values her integrity and wouldn't publish anything untrue. She leaves him to enjoy the sunset alone, aware that there's more to the story than Hank's letting on, but knowing that he doesn't trust her enough to tell her anything. He's left speechless and frustrated after the encounter. Allison heads inside and finds a set of Annabelle's books on a shelf. She starts to read out loud from one of them, and Stella comes up behind her with an old camera, teasing Allison about being a romantic. She explains that Annabelle used the camera to photograph and document things on the ranch before she wrote about them. When she decided to stop writing, she disconnected from everything that reminded her of it, leaving her typewriter, camera, and the ranch behind, and her friend as well. Stella always respected her decision, but preserved her things for posterity. Allison wants to take a photo of Stella, so she hands her the book she was reading and snaps a shot while she's laughing. Hank happens to walk in and see the two women bonding, watching nervously as Allison continues to become involved in his family's life. Later that night, Stella comes out to the garden and meets Hank. It seems to be a tradition that the two of them stargaze together. However, tonight, Hank isn't in the mood for it. He's frustrated that Stella is letting a journalist into their lives at this stage when they don't have much time left together. He wants to spend it as a family. Stella knows it's not just about that, and reaffirms to Hank that she wants Allison to be able to tell Annabelle's story, because it's going to give her the closure she needs. Hank's worried that Allison will expose Stella's secret, but although Stella's grateful for his protection, she thinks he's overreacting because of his ex, who was also a career-chasing city girl, and it seems the two had a messy ending. She begs him not to project his past onto Allison, who she knows came with good intentions. Hank eventually gives in, but reminds her he'll be keeping an eye on her. The next day, Stella wakes Allison up early, letting her know Annabelle never missed a sunrise. She takes her around the ranch's grounds, telling her more about the writer's life and experience there, as they explore all over, taking photos and discussing everything. They walk past Hank, who's installing a bird feeder, and to his consternation, Allison snaps a photo of him, but he shakes his head with a small smile as he watches them walk away. They end up skipping rocks and making kites down by the lake, as Hank observes from a distance, trying to decide whether Allison really is a threat to his grandmother. Allison explains to Stella that in school, she started her own book club, based on a club from one of Annabelle's books. For every book they read, they donate it to the school library. Stella explains, to her astonishment, that the book club on which Allison's high school club was based was actually real. Allison is amazed at all of Annabelle's accomplishments and doesn't understand why someone who did so much for the world would choose to remain anonymous. Stella lets Allison know that Hank can show her a great spot to try out her new kite. Allison's apprehensive about his attitude, but Stella promises that being in nature cheers him up. Hank leads her over the fields to a hill over the ranch called Lover's Lookout. Allison is still in wonder that the ranch could even be real, as it feels like it's something straight out of the book she loves so dearly. Hank tells her about a legend involving the hill, but she picks him up on it straight away, saying it's in the books, and teases him about being a fan of the romance novels. He denies it immediately, but the tension between them has been eased by her jokes. Allison narrates the events of the story that took place on this hill, and marvels that Hank is actually smiling in her presence. Hank defensively remarks that he is capable of enjoying himself, and she laughs as they settle down on a blanket to watch the sunset. He admits that he's impressed with how much she knows about the books, and she explains that she had a difficult family life. Her parents didn't have the kind of love the characters did, so she always read Annabelle's books to feel like she was somewhere far away. They made her feel like that kind of love could exist, like there were beautiful places in the world. Hank is enraptured by her story, his initial attraction to her starting to return now he's beginning to realize she isn't out to destroy them. He asks her tentatively if she ever found the kind of love the books talk about, but she laughs it off, countering him by asking whether work counts. The mood grows a little more serious, and she asks him off the record why he moved back from the city. Hank's expression turns somber and tells her that he fell in love with someone who didn't love him back, and decided after she broke things off that he'd return to the ranch and look after his grandmother, since it was the same year his grandpa died. Allison is touched by the fact he's actually opening up to her. Just then, a wind picks up, and Hank frantically grabs the kite, running out to catch the breeze. Later, they enter the kitchen, laughing together. Stella and Marie are mid-cooking. They tease the pair about being up on Lover's Lookout, but Allison and Hank brush it off and ask about the food. Hank asks whether Susan is going to be joining them, and Stella explains she'll be there for dinner, but couldn't come by to help prepare. Allison voluntarily rolls up her sleeves to join them. To Hank's surprise, he had her pegged as a city girl who wouldn't know the first thing about making her own food. He offers to lend her a hand, brushing some flour off of her nose, causing Stella and Marie to concentrate forcefully on their tasks because of the thick tension. The moment is broken by the arrival of Susan with a plate of her own cookies. She's heard all about Allison's visit and is excited to meet her. They share a pizza together as Marie declares that Allison should have the first slice since she's the guest. Allison tries to call Ivy later that night to give her an update, as she's been slacking on submitting her drafts, but her boss's mailbox is full. She sits down and begins to write instead, about how everyone's always rushing through life and doesn't stop to appreciate the small moments, victories, hardships, and everything in between. Annabelle reminded everyone of life's beauty by capturing these moments in text, so that anyone could enjoy them at any time. Her narrative carries over to the next day, where she's taking pictures of Hank as he rows towards her across a small creek. He teases her about taking so many photos of him, and offers to take her into town to buy her a new roll of film, on the proviso that she joins him in the boat first. Allison is nervous about going on the water, but trusts Hank to keep her safe, so she tentatively agrees. He helps her step into the craft and then rows them out into the water, and the two drift on the picturesque creek together, in a beautiful scene surrounded by forests and the sounds of nature. The tension between them has slowly become something else, but neither of them are yet ready to confront what it might mean. Meanwhile, Stella receives a call from someone called Mr. O'Leary, and it seems to be bad news. She hangs up with a grimace. Back on the creek, Hank is opening up even more to Allison about his life. His parents moved to Los Angeles and started their own restaurant, but they'd always spend their summers back in Cedar Creek with his grandparents. That's where he developed a love of the land and learned about how to take care of the ranch, because he wanted to inherit it himself one day. He's caught up in the nostalgia of reminiscing about his childhood when Allison brings him back down to earth by asking him why he moved to the ranch permanently. He sighs and reluctantly reveals that he was working as an architect in the city, but his fiancée stole his designs and presented them to the firm. They made her a partner and he lost his job. Allison is devastated for him, but he shrugs it off, because in the end, he moved back to the ranch to help his grandmother. He is happier there than he ever would have been in the city, and it revealed his fiancée's true colors before it was too late. He affirms that he's never looked back. Hank takes Allison to town as he promised, and they pick up her new rolls of film and leave the rest to be developed. It seems like everyone in town has a great opinion of Stella, as the shop owner mentions that Clybourne is always his go-to for fresh produce. The pair get breakfast, and then Hank decides to grill Allison about her life, since she's asked him so much about himself. He's intrigued as to how she became a journalist when she doesn't seem to have the temperament he would expect from someone in that profession. She explains that during college she took literary studies and never intended to go into journalism, but she had an unexpected talent for it that was picked up by Ivy, who offered her a step onto her career, and since then, she's just never stepped away. This trip to Clybourne seems to be the first time she's actually taken some time to breathe. It's probably why she felt as though something was missing from her life, because she lost sight of the reason why she loved writing in the first place. Hank advises her to stay the course, because she's clearly ambitious and passionate, so no matter what she does, she'll end up successful. By this point, he's obviously really into her. They arrive at the farmer's market, where Stella, Susan, and Marie are manning the Cookie Kid's stall. It's pretty quiet there, and Stella explains that this is as busy as it usually gets. Hank and his grandmother have a sweet moment together, and Allison secretly captures it on her phone camera and posts it to her social media, hoping to drum up some interest in the stall. Stella then takes her over to a clothes stall to get her into a more practical outfit for a day's work, and meanwhile, people begin to approach the Cookie Kid stand, having seen Allison's post. At the clothing stall, Allison gets dressed up in jeans, a breezy shirt, and a cowboy hat. Hank comes to fetch them, as it's blown up at the stall and they need all hands on deck, and stops for a moment, stunned by Allison's new look. He thanks her for using her influence to draw in some customers for them, appreciative of her help. Just then, though, she receives a call from Ivy, who berates her for her post, shouting down her protests, and ordering her to get working on a proper article that accurately reflects the kind of journalism she promised she would deliver. Allison is downcast and doesn't know what to do. She doesn't tell anyone else her worries, though, not wanting to spoil the perfect mood at the stand. Later, Allison walks alone in the field, narrating to her phone the words Stella told her when they were making kites, that good deeds don't need recognition. This was the mantra by which Annabelle Harper lived, and why she chose to remain anonymous, and Allison wonders what the world would be like if everyone tried living by such words. Back inside, Hank is ecstatic that they sold out of everything they brought to the market, and Stella hints that perhaps Allison's presence has brought more good than he thought. He smiles at her teasing tone, but firmly tells his grandmother that he and Allison are just friends. It's all business, and she'll be back in Seattle before the end of the week. Stella urges him not to run away from his feelings for her. She tells him the story of how his parents got together, and begs him to take action, because she doesn't want him to lose his own happiness because he didn't want to take a risk. Hank makes excuses about having too much to do, and that it's the last thing on his mind. But Stella is resolute that he needs to make a move before it's too late, or he'll never know, and maybe always have regrets about it. Allison is listening to music in the barn when Hank approaches. They flirt for a moment, then he holds out his hand and asks her if she wants to dance with him. They dance together closely, holding each other, and Allison teases him about being an undercover romantic. Breathlessly, he admits that maybe he is, and leans in to kiss her, but Allison backs away, suddenly panicking, and flees the scene, terrified of what her feelings for him might mean. Hank is left alone, disappointed and confused. Allison heads outside to think and receives a call from Ivy, informing her that there's been a huge development at the mayor's office and they need her to shorten her trip and get back to Seattle ASAP, as he will only talk to Allison. This could be huge as they'll be the only publication with an exclusive scoop on local politics. Allison is left with no choice as Ivy cuts the call, torn between her career and the place, and man, she's already grown to love. The next morning, Allison prepares to leave. She's upset that she's having to go early, but she can't go against Ivy or she risks losing her job. As she's about to depart, she overhears Hank and Stella having an argument about losing the ranch. It appears his fears about her generosity were well-founded. The call from Mr. O'Leary was to let them know that they will be foreclosing on the property. Not wanting to invade their privacy, she walks in to let them know that she's going early. But apparently, a stone-faced Hank informs her that Ivy beat her to the punch. She called the house that morning and told them that Allison was leaving voluntarily, as she figured out that covering a poky little farm and backwoods country hicks won't advance her career. Devastated, Allison tries to explain to Hank that she never said any of that. But stung by his past trauma, her rejection the previous night, and upset about losing his home, he won't have any of it and storms out. Stella takes Allison's hand and reassures her that she believes her, as the tears threaten to fall from Allison's eyes. Back in Seattle, Allison takes the interview from the mayor, and Ivy is extremely pleased with her work. However, she can't concentrate. Her thoughts are with Hank and Stella, worried about them losing everything, about how she didn't see it. She's unable to do anything to help and it's killing her, the image of Hank storming out of the room haunting her every moment. She has a conversation with her friend, when suddenly, seeing the photos she took of Cedar Creek gives her a flash of inspiration. She deletes her entire draft of the mayor's interview and starts writing furiously, determined to do what she can to save the ranch. That night, Stella and Hank sit out under the stars once again. She reminisces about the day he turned up with his bags to look after her, and thanks him for his company throughout the years. Hank's still upset about Allison's departure, but Stella is sure that the two will find a way to come together again. Even as night truly falls, Allison is still in her office, typing away, and she quickly makes a call to someone at the Cedar Creek Tribune. The following morning, Hank picks up Allison's developed photos from the shop. He sees there are many more photos of himself than he realized, and begins to wonder if Allison really did feel the same way about him. The shop owner remarks about the write-up of the ranch in the Tribune, and Hank frowns, but reaches for the paper, curious to see what it's about. He reads the whole article in his truck, then smiles and drives away, knowing that Allison didn't abandon them after all. Allison makes her way nervously into Ivy's office, and finds out that because she called another publication and gave them her article, she's fired for breach of contract. Ivy is unable to do anything to help her, as it's there in black and white. Allison is upset that she's losing her whole career, but still knows that she did the right thing. Her friend comes to see her as she's packing up her desk, feeling guilty for playing a part in convincing her to go to Cedar Creek in the first place. But Allison reassures her that it's not her fault and passes her the mayor's interview information, letting her know there's nobody she'd rather have getting the scoop. Just as she's about to leave, Marie calls her, asking whether she's coming back for the last harvest of the year. Allison is hesitant, as she knows she'll need to be job hunting now, but she tries to hide it from Marie and be upbeat. Susan then takes the phone and thanks Allison for the article she wrote, gushing about what an amazing piece of work it was, and everything it's done for the town and the ranch. Allison is glad to hear that they liked it, but then Susan unwittingly reveals Stella's true secret, that she actually is Annabelle Harper. Allison is gobsmacked by the news, and suddenly, as all the puzzle pieces fit together, she realizes what she needs to do. At Clybourne, Hank and Stella are discussing Allison's article when Marie arrives. Stella tells Hank that there's only one reason why Allison would help them after the way they all left things, and she knows he knows what it is. Hank begins to realize that he made a huge mistake in letting her go. Marie informs them that Allison lost her job. She could tell over the phone, despite her efforts to hide it. Hank sets his jaw and marches into the house, determined to get Allison her job back. He won't let her suffer for helping them. Not long afterwards, Allison pulls up to the ranch and tells Stella her plan. She begs her to come out of the shadows and reveal herself as Annabelle Harper, embracing the persona once again. Although she gave it up because she was dealing with a difficult time in her life, that doesn't mean that it has to lie in the past forever. If Stella is willing, Allison will use what influence she has to host a charity event with the proceeds going to the ranch, to allow all the charitable work that Stella has done in her life to be repaid to her. People want to help her, but they don't know how, and Allison is sure she's come up with the perfect solution. Stella is unsure, but eventually, she agrees. She admits that she invited Allison there so she could finally close the last chapter of the ranch, but after everything they've been through together, she now shares her vision of saving it. Meanwhile, Hank arrives at the Seattle Daily building. He's looking around for Ivy to try and beg for Allison to have her job back, when he runs into her friend, who recognizes him instantly as the cowboy that Allison told her all about. She explains the plan about the charity event to Hank, then leaves him in front of Ivy's office, wishing him good luck. He marches in with a determined expression, but Ivy refuses before he's even got a word out. Hank doesn't let her shut him down, though, and reminds her that even though she thinks she knows what's best for Allison, nobody knows that better than Allison herself, and she's obviously meant to do something different than what Ivy envisioned. That doesn't mean that it's not worth anything. Despite herself, Ivy is swayed by his arguments and agrees to give Allison another chance. That night, the charity hoedown is in full swing. Allison is taking pictures as everyone dances and laughs. Ivy arrives, looking incredibly out of place in such an environment, and is greeted by Marie, who convinces her to have a dance. She seems to be letting the country air get to her, as she's loosened up considerably from being the stiff editor-in-chief she is in the office. Allison spots her and heads over, followed swiftly by Hank and her friend. Allison is beyond confused about what everyone is doing there, but her friend leads her off to the attractions, telling her she doesn't want to know. Later on, Ivy surprises everyone by stepping up on stage and announcing that she will be happy to make a donation. She's seen now that Cedar Creek is a special town, and it's bringing back all the memories she had as a child when her grandfather owned a ranch just like Clybourne. She pulls out a check and donates the final $15,000 that Clybourne needs to stay open, and everyone celebrates. Stella is overcome with joy as she hugs Hank, ecstatic that they don't have to give up their home. She looks at him seriously and tells him that it's now or never. He approaches Allison in the crowd and asks her to dance. He tells her he owes her an apology for the way he treated her. The truth is, he knew from the very first moment he saw her that there was something special between them. But he was afraid of confronting it, so he ran away and hid behind his protective layers of judgment. She didn't deserve that. Allison admits that she realized a while ago that what she was missing wasn't part of her work, but part of her soul, the part that's filled by him. She, too, was afraid of what it really meant, but now she's ready. Hank promises he'll never let anything come between them again, as he leans down and seals his words with a passionate kiss. They continue to hold each other, dancing and kissing as the festivities go on around them, as the stars shine down on the beauty of Clybourne Ranch.